The Skeptic of Stanton Hall by Carolyn Eldridge Alfonsetti of North Epping, 2121. Narrated by Janine Penfold. Put that back! Deirdre watched the young boy hesitantly place the lead soldier back on the low table. You shouldn't be behind the ropes at all, she snapped. I thought your school left hours ago. I don't go to school. Deirdre examined the boy more closely. No. He wasn't wearing a uniform, rather a hand-knitted maroon jumper and a pair of long grey shorts. Where are your parents then? She asked. I don't know. The boy's bottom lip trembled. Deirdre softened. Neither she nor the other guides at Stanton Hall could believe the number of parents who left children as young as 6 or 7 unsupervised to run amok and touch the exhibits. Well, said Deirdre, we'll have to find whoever brought you. But, stammered the boy. Nanny says I'm not to leave the nursery. Deirdre frowned as she imagined an exhausted elderly woman enjoying a restorative cuppa in the museum's tea room. Your grandmother shouldn't have left you here alone. The boy giggled. Nanny's not my grandmother. Deirdre stifled a smile. There was something likeable about this odd boy with his unfashionable haircut, and something strangely familiar about his large hazel eyes. Come with me, she said, then led him out of the nursery and onto the runner of carpet that stretched to Stanton Hall's grand staircase. What's your name? She asked. Laurie, he replied. Deirdre stopped walking and turned towards the boy. Laurie, did you say? He nodded. Deirdre stared at the boy in his little leather shoes and socks and felt the hairs on the back of her neck begin to bristle. His wide mouth and green-flecked eyes bore a striking resemblance to the portrait of Lord Stanton that hung in the mansion's drawing room. Lord and Lady Stanton's only child, a boy who died young of scarlet fever, had been named Lawrence, after his father. Deirdre mentally shook herself. She was being ridiculous. Lawrence wasn't such an unusual name. Still, she felt uneasy. Of all Stanton Hall's volunteer guides, Deirdre was the only one who hadn't claimed to have experienced some kind of strange presence when alone on the second floor. Some talked of feeling as if they were being watched. Some reported objects having moved from where they had been. Others told of a momentary glimpse of a long-skirted figure in the hallway. Deirdre had dismissed these claims as the manifestations of overly fertile imaginations. When you had studied a family's history, rattled off many hundreds of hour-long spiels about them and their staff, and had shown off their home and possessions year after year, it was natural that it might almost seem as if they were still about. But ghosts? Phooey. Despite her scepticism, Deirdre couldn't bring herself to ask the young boy's surname. Instead, she primly urged him to come along now as he scampered behind her down the wide, curved staircase, across the marble-tiled foyer, past the close-for-the-day ticket desk and out through the imposing front doorway. Noticing that dusk was falling, Deirdre stopped on the long, sandstone front steps and checked her watch. The tea shop in the old stables will be closing, but we'll look for your Nanny there. I like Nanny, said Laurie, skipping down the steps towards the circular gravel driveway. She makes me laugh and sings me silly songs. Deirdre felt reassured. According to all the material she'd read on Stanton Hall, Master Lawrence's nanny had been Mrs. Winters, reputedly frosty by both name and nature. A sepia photograph of her dated 1901 and reproduced in the Stanton Hall visitors brochure, portrayed Nanny Winters as a stern and matronly-looking woman with a dark mole on one of her many chins. She certainly didn't look the type for frivolity. As the pair crunched their way across the gravel towards the tea shop, Deirdre turned up the collar of her blazer. Night was falling rapidly, and the temperature with it. Knowing the caretaker would be starting to lock up the buildings, Deirdre rehearsed the fierce dressing down she would give the boy's neglectful nanny. Suddenly, Laurie ran ahead. "Nanny!" he cried, as Deirdre noticed in the distance a slim young woman wearing a long woolen coat and with her hair pulled back. Deirdre chuckled. That was no Nanny Winters. She chastised herself for imagining, even for a second, that the boy could be Master Lawrence Stanton's ghost. Deirdre watched Laurie take the young woman's hand. He turned and smiled, then waved before the pair began to walk, side by side, down the long drive toward the estate's elaborate wrought-iron gates. He's safe now, I suppose, Deirdre reasoned, and abandoned her plan to confront the nanny. She hugged her arms around her chest for warmth and walked swiftly back towards the light glowing in the foyer of the stately house. Once inside, Deirdre stopped to pick up a brochure that had fallen to the floor from a display rack. As she straightened up, she noticed its reproduction of a grainy photograph of Stanton Hall's household staff lined up, formally, on the sandstone steps. As Deirdre's eyes took in the figure on the far left of the bottom step, she gasped. It was Hayes. It was Hayes, the 20-year-old upstairs maid, who had reportedly been killed by a carriage whilst running to fetch the priest to Master Lawrence's deathbed. Nanette Hayes, who wore her dark hair scraped back in a low bun. Nanette, possibly nicknamed Nanny? Deirdre dropped the brochure and rushed to the front steps of Stanton Hall, just in time to see a small boy and a young woman in a long coat dematerialise in the cold dusk air. The end.